We have our whole cheering squad.
Hey
Hi.
guys.
How's it going? It's bright. It's quite bright. I'm Natasha from Boys Club.
I'm Deana from Boys Club. Hi.
I'm Kim from A16Z Crypto.
And here we're going to talk about marketing, attention, liquidity, trading in memes, markets, and Mindshare. So excited, Kim, to have you. Do you want to do a little introduction before we get started?
Sure, yeah. So I'll tell you about my crypto background mostly.
Great.
I started at Andreessen Horowitz in 2013, a long time ago, when we as a firm first started investing in crypto, Bitcoin, obviously, mostly at that time. We also did the Coinbase investment around that time.
Congratulations.
Flex.
Yeah, that was a good one for the firm. And then, things died out for a while. We didn't know if this whole crypto thing that we got really excited about was going to work. And then with the advent of Ethereum and new projects like that coming to light, then we're like, oh, this thing maybe is happening and people are actually building stuff on it. So we started investing again. We kicked off our first fund, second fund, and then around that time, just after the second fund, I went over to Coinbase and took them through their public listing, started getting involved in all of the fund policy battles that we're all dealing with now. And then in 2022, I came back to A16Z Crypto to focus 100% on our crypto fund.
Amazing, and so honored to have you. We're gonna jump in. So you sit across a portfolio of teams that are building in and around crypto, various stages, some super early stage, some more mature. I'm curious, just given your vantage point, you have such a unique perspective. What's the most common question that you get asked about marketing, narratives, brand building from your founders or from the teams?
Yeah, should I do it? It's pretty basic, honestly. It's a lot of the same things around when's the right time to hire the first person. What's the best way for us to get going? Like, how important is it for us to have a profile? We're decentralized, like it shouldn't be all hinging on one person, but everybody tells us we should build a profile. Like, is that the right thing to do?
You mean a personal profile?
Personal profile, yeah. Mostly on social, obviously through social. So, who should we hire? Consultants, agencies. Token marketing is a big one that's been coming up lately, which I think is interesting, which I think is also kind of funny. I'm like, I don't know if you should attach marketing to that. You kind of have to separate the token aspect of it, I think, from all of the tried and true marketing strategies. So we can talk a little bit more about that.
And what trends are you seeing right now in what you guys are investing in, the marketing strategies? Like, what are some things that you're seeing that are pretty consistent across the board for what people are building?
For marketing specifically, or
for marketing, I think I remember us talking a few weeks ago or last week, and you were saying that you were just off 3 consistent calls where they were like, okay, how do I get in front of traders? And that was something that you kept hearing over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, what are those things that you're like, wow, I'm having this conversation specific about different trends or things that you're seeing?
One trend that was happening a lot that I see fading, which I think is a good thing, is everybody would come to us and say, I want to hire a CMO. And I'm like, well, you haven't really even started doing marketing. I don't know if you need a C-level marketing person, right? Like, maybe you should start with hiring a consultant or a small agency and just get going with building your profile on social, working on your narrative, getting your website in order. There's maybe a couple other things that you need to do before you bring in somebody at that level. And maybe it's better to have maybe a more junior person who can do a bunch of different things. Versus maybe a high-level person who's going to be expecting to walk in the door with a big budget and hire a big team. So I'm seeing a little bit less of that. I think that they got the message that, or maybe a lot of people got burned too with that and realized okay, that's actually not the right time for us or the right role for us to bring in. So that one I'd say is fading a bit, which is good.
When do you think is a good time to bring in a senior level or CMO level marketing leader?
I think it's good once you have a little bit of traction with your product, and you have a story to tell, right? You have some anecdotes, some stats, some ingredients that will help tell a story. I I think earlier stage, it's great to hire a marketing person, but they don't have to be full-time, and they don't necessarily have to be on contract endlessly, right? You can bring them in on a project basis around key milestones, like you're doing a big product launch, you're doing a big sort of pivot as a company. Whatever that moment is, I do think it is worth leaning into it, making it a moment, hiring good people, putting a plan together, and doing something more than just tweeting, which is what a lot of folks end up doing. And then when you have a little bit more of that, like a steadier cadence of that, then it's time to think about, like, okay, maybe we'll bring in a director of marketing because we want to do more events. We want to lean into content more. We want somebody dedicated to help us with press and our social and some of these things who can help organize this effort a little bit. Sometimes I find that people bring in specialists and then they are like, okay, we have a couple specialists in these narrow areas, but now we need somebody who can bring it all together in a more generalist way. I'm always a big fan, too, for startups to hire marketing folks that are just on the cusp of being at that senior level, and they're hungry, right? So they're hungry to prove themselves, and they're maybe more interested in coming to an early stage startup where they can take that more director VP role and own that, but maybe not have the same expectations as somebody coming from a larger company who's used to big budgets and big teams.
Yeah, something that we talk a lot about when we talk to early stage teams is hiring for what we call like entrepreneurial marketers, like people who have sort of a bone for either they have previously been founders or they've worked really closely with founders before at early teams and then scaled them. Because there's a big difference between marketers who are used to doing like a Coinbase, Super Bowl ad, and someone who's thinking about like, okay, what's a really great activation in an ecosystem conference or something like that. And so having someone who's willing to roll with the punches and kind of be creative about the budget that they have is, I think, really important for teams that are quite early.
Yeah, have the hustle and be a doer, right? And like you said, like be scrappy, like think about creative ways to make things happen that don't include hiring a big giant agency to put something together, right?
What do you feel like when you're in conversation with these teams, like is the biggest sort of misconception or the biggest thing that they get hung up around with marketing, maybe besides sort of team structure?
Cost sometimes, which shouldn't be a problem in crypto because I think companies are fairly well funded and they can afford to spend a little. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money, by the way. Again, you don't necessarily have to hire a big agency and commit yourself to a $30,000 retainer every month. You can hire a consultant for $5K a month and even just have them on a project basis. So budget can sometimes get in the way. I think also, we tend to work with and invest in a lot of technical founders. So they have an engineering mindset and they don't maybe understand naturally what the investment in marketing gets them, right? They're sort of like, we will build it and they will come. And the product needs to just work organically. And I think we know that that's not going to be, because I think also we're in a world now where it's gotten more competitive. So there are options, and sometimes the best tech doesn't win. I've seen that now a few times where really the best technical teams are losing out to teams that have better marketing or better BD, a better story, right? So sometimes they learn that lesson a little late, unfortunately. And then I say time, when it comes to like building your social profile, for example, a lot of them are like, when do I have to build? I don't have time to tweet. Like, they don't feel like it's serious. But then I'll tell you, like, the founders that do take it seriously and build an audience can end up having so much more leverage, right? So when it is time to, number one, recruit, they have a lot of people who know them and can get a sense of what it's like to work with them and the company and vouch for them. It also, when you are ready to have your big announcement, which is a startup, you don't always have that many announcements, right? So you really want to milk those moments. And if you have that audience that you've built up over time, when you are ready to say something on behalf of your company or your brand, people are there to listen, right? I think Claire Carr, who we both know, has done a really great job of that, right? Aztec is maybe a not as well-known project before, but she came in gangbusters, built this huge social profile, and I think has really allowed them to punch above their weight.
Yeah, I totally agree. One thing that I'd love for you to talk a little bit about, you mentioned it here and we talked about it last week, is the difference between when you have an announcement, and I've seen this a lot, founders, usually technical founders who don't have a marketing background will be like, oh, we're going to tweet about it, and don't have an understanding between like an announcement that just goes on Twitter in a thread and a campaign, and how to build campaign thinking. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about, what is campaigns? What does that look like? How can brands and builders be thinking about having something that's a little bit more robust when they have something to talk about?
Yeah, I think about it as like you're telling one big story. So the biggest moment is when you launch, right? And that's a campaign. So it's in that campaign by campaign, it doesn't necessarily have to mean paid advertising, right? It can start with a really good blog post that explains sort of, what it is that you're building, why you're the best person to build it, how what you're doing is different than anybody else, and start to kind of pull people in. And then you can build and support that story with announcements that happen after it. You can build and support that story by tweeting, going on Farcaster, starting to build a social audience around what you're doing. The other thing I'll say is, like, as a founder, you don't necessarily want to just be hawking your products and your company all the time. You can't build an audience like that, right? People get tired of feeling like they're getting sold to all the time. And people follow people because people find their stories interesting. And so one of the things I always encourage founders to do is to build out loud, right? Build in public. Like, talk about your journey as a founder and what you're experiencing every day. People can learn from that. They can bond over that. I think Tolly does this really, really well. He's a great example of just sort of talking about, like, some of the challenges, like, hey, we just got out of this meeting and we're realizing this thing, and people can chime in. I think it can be a good recruiting tool so people understand what your culture is like. The other thing too is, in between these moments when you don't have news, how can you trend jack whatever is going on in the conversation, right? Because again, as a startup, you don't have a lot of news moments, right? So you have a big announcement. Let's say you do a great campaign around it, but you don't want to go dark for 6 months while your product's getting ready or you're waiting for your test net or what have you. So what can you do to still stay present? And that's when you have to really get smart about, well, what's the conversation and what can I add to that conversation? Maybe the conversation's around stablecoins right now, and I can add to that, even though I don't have a stablecoin product. That's fine. You're just putting yourself out there as a smart, insightful person that people want to listen to. How does that help you? Then that means when, let's say, media are writing about that topic, they can quote you, they can call you, you're part of that conversation. You've then built relationships that you can then go and call on when it's your moment and you have something to say about your company.
I want to get your take on something I've been thinking a lot about at this conference. It's an incredible conference, very high fidelity. In terms of the crypto industry, it really feels like we're growing up in many ways. And I think that that's evident here. And I think that's also evident from how the stablecoin conversation and narrative is developing and the types of players that are coming into our worlds now. And how that relates to memes and Mindshare. So much of crypto marketing and crypto comms has been built on a foundation of shitposting on Twitter. And I just wonder how we reconcile that with an industry that's maturing, and how to play it, because that is in the DNA of how this industry works every day. I mean, crypto moves at the speed of Twitter and at the speed of the internet, largely driven by that type of stuff. So I'm just, curious, where the balance is, if we need to grow up, if it's fine the way it is.
Yeah. I mean, we all come for the culture, right? We love that stuff. We love the sort of whimsical fun, irreverence, the mission. I think people are, I think if you're from the outside looking in, it may not look serious, but it's actually, the people working in this space are the most serious people I've ever worked with.
And by the way,
right?
I totally agree. But if you're a VP at Bank of America and you're like, oh, I might partner with this person, I'm going to look at their Twitter profile, and they're like, wait, what is going on here?
Well, I think for the person that goes and meets with Bank of America, they are not going to be showing up in their hoodie, right? It's going to be, they have to. So it's really who's your audience? And if your audience, we were talking about the traders thing earlier, that's because, and I was having that conversation again and again because there's been a number of our portfolio companies who've pivoted to focusing on that audience. And so you have to think, okay, what's going to serve that audience? That's a different group of podcasts that we're going to go on. That's a different group of influencers that we need to get in front of and who need to support us. It's maybe different language that we have on our website. Like we have to sort of cater everything to that. The same if you are trying to reach big trad, finance, banks, et cetera, right? Like you need to be able to talk to that audience. So I think we will just keep adapting. There always is going to be that sort of degen, like irreverent part to us, which I think we're all going to, I think it'd be sad for that to go away completely. But then we also are going to mature in other ways. And I'd say on the marketing side, we're starting to mature too. Like you guys saw, World did that amazing US launch. I think that was a great example of what crypto can do as it grows up. Like they did this massive SF event, there were probably 500 people there. It was very slick, Apple-like. I thought it was a really good moment for this industry to say like, oh, actually we can do stuff like that too. I think Coinbase is also showing folks what we can do and what's possible and how you can tell a really good story and tell it in a big mainstream way. So I think it's going to happen naturally, but at the end of the day, like you have to figure out who's your audience and how do you talk to that audience. And if it's, TradFi, then you're going to have to speak their language.
Totally.
I also think that who's your audience and how you approach them can evolve over time. Like I think about Coinbase and Brian Armstrong for a long time was not a very forward person on the timeline. You didn't see him on podcasts. You didn't see him on the circuit. Like it was very much like a leader who was, cooking in the back. And then over the last year or 2 years, I feel like that strategy has really shifted, and it's really, I think, humanized Coinbase. I think it's given them a lot more warmth to, I think, that what felt like a very, very cold brand. And so, yeah, I see that changing over time. And I think being adaptive to what the market needs, not necessarily the financial markets, but like your marketing market needs, and being able to roll with those punches as you
go. When do you think that brands are ready, or companies, crypto companies, are ready for that type of brand marketing? Like you speak about Coinbase and the World event, a big experiential event, like very much rooted in a brand marketing experience. Like clearly that's not going to be right for every team. Like at what stage do you feel like that does become appropriate?
Yeah, so the World example is they had a product that was rolling out to the whole US, and literally any consumer could download the app and go get verified, right? And they're trying to get as many people to get verified as possible. So that's a pretty mass campaign that you have to do, right? Coinbase has, a huge user base. They're all over the world. Again, they're going after very mainstream users as kind of an on-ramp to crypto. Makes tons of sense for them to have these big paid campaigns. If you are an early project and let's say you're not even at mainnet, if that's your case, like you don't need to, it doesn't make sense for you to do some giant brand campaign, right? If you are, let's say, a little bit more evolved and you're in a space where you have a very, somewhat mature product, and you are in a highly competitive environment, then you do have to be pretty bold, right? And you have to spend some money and you have to get your community together, right? Like, so, for example, if you're an L1, I think it's really competitive and you've got to spend quite a bit on marketing and community development to stand out and to make some noise and to show your differentiators. I think that's kind of a, where you do need to take some more risks. But I think look, if you're targeting a small set of developers, I think you can be a little bit more one-to-one in your approach too. I don't know if a big sort of brand focus is worth the spend.
Okay, two things come up for me in that. One is the conference circuit. I want to get your take on that and what feels...
The never-ending conference.
What feels like worth doing. But also really interested in your take on just sort of KOLs, influencers, that approach and that lane in marketing too. But let's start with conferences. You could, every day, we could be going somewhere, traveling somewhere, and going to a different conference. Yeah. Many people do. I respect that hustle, but I think sometimes just question what is worth investing in from a marketing perspective. And I suppose that like sort of encompasses some BD as well, but like, if you're showing up in somewhere and you're investing in somewhere, like how are you making those distinctions, and like what do you feel like is worth doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think crypto loves their events. It's also, I think, a function of it always being a really decentralized community, right? Like we're all over the world.
Yeah.
So how do you really get people to gather in one spot? So, I don't know. I think, again, it depends on, what your focus is. If you're an L1, you've got to hustle. You got to bring people together around your product. You got to show them what's different. You got to, appeal to them. And so I think that makes sense. Does it make sense for founders to go on a constant roadshow of events? No, absolutely not. Like they should pick a few that are really important for them, and then they should be building, you know?
I think also sometimes with especially with like the L1 game in particular, I can just speak to that with my experience at Cello. It's a lot of it also comes from like, you want to show up somewhere, but like part of it is like not showing up somewhere can be a statement as well, like, and that can sometimes be like read any number of ways. And so I think a lot of teams and founders just go so that they're not in a conversation around like, well, so-and-so isn't at ETH Denver, and they're not showing up in a big way. Like, what does that mean?
Yeah. So then it's like, how do you divide and conquer? Like,
right.
The founder doesn't need to be everywhere. Maybe it makes more sense a lot of times for the BD person. I know even our go-to-market folks are always on the road, and it makes sense for them to always be on the road, right? But yeah, I think you have to conserve your energy and time, right? At the end of the day, you want to build something, and if you're at conferences half the year, what are you going to show for it?
Totally. One thing that you said was like being out in these conferences, talking to builders. You've talked a lot in the past around doing things that don't scale at an early time, talking to your users. I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that and what that could look like for teams and how they should be approaching sort of that work that they're like, wow, this is a moment in time that I need to do this, and then what they can take from that to implement into the things that they're building.
Yeah, I think it was Amanda Tyler at Optimism, who was at Optimism, who I think articulated this really well, where like sometimes you don't have to scale your efforts. Sometimes it is good to be very one-to-one. Like she talked about sort of digging through GitHub and all the kind of community channels to really figure out like who are some of their most like excited developers, users, and then how can she really build relationships with them, understand their feedback, and really take that to heart and implement it. And that was more important than doing a big brand campaign, right? Yeah. So I think there's something to be said for there's some things that you just can't scale, and that's okay, especially if you're in the earlier stages. I will also say I think it is really important to take the time and energy to figure out like who you are, like what is your brand position? How are you different than anybody else? Who is it that you're going after? If you can really get some sentiment, if you do have early users, customers, like what can you learn from those interactions and put them into the next? I find sometimes it sounds really simple, but sometimes companies don't take the time to do that. Really thinking about like, okay, what is our value prop? How do we want to build that into our sales pitch? Just being really thoughtful about what your differentiators are. So it's getting really noisy, right? So how are you going to stand out?
Okay, I want to get into some of the juicy stuff here. Best and worst campaigns. Let's start with best campaigns that you've seen recently.
I think I'll go back to World. I thought that was a really good one. I thought it was cohesive. I think it was clear what they were trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
I think they took all their firepower. They put, got Sam Altman to show up on stage. They got the mayor of San Francisco to show up. They just put everything into it. So I thought that was it.
Gavin Newsom was there as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, spotted. It's like Gavin Newsom's here.
Yeah.
So that was a good one.
Yeah.
I'm not going to name names on the bad one.
Okay. Come on.
Deana, give me your best and worst.
Not a campaign, but I love the work that Squid Router. Do you know Squid, the team? They're a bridge, and it's not like campaign work, but they have just a really standout brand, and it's really beautiful. They do an incredible job with it's actually like merch that you would want, which is so rare.
That is very rare, yeah.
So rare, and it's really cool. And I think it's just what I like about their marketing is that just from a design, it's design first, design led. It's really fresh. It's not just the same sort of gradient and ChatGPT copy over and over again. So it's really fresh, and then also that carries over into the product experience. And I think that that's something, as a marketer, you always want the brand expression that you're building to carry over into product.
Yeah.
You don't always have that ability, and I think for Squid, like that's actually the experience that you have when you're bridging, which is a terrifying thing to do. But somehow I feel comforted when I'm using Squid. What about you?
Best.
Yeah.
Coinbase did an ad like last year. I think it was called Upgrade the System, something like that.
Yeah.
That one, I found like that was actually quite polarizing,
Oh, really?
which I think sometimes can be a good thing.
Great.
Totally.
Great thing.
Great
Yeah.
thing.
Because
I
it
love
gets
that.
the conversation going.
Gets people going.
Yeah.
Yeah, and basically, for those who didn't see it, the ad follows like a baby being born up until she's like she has a family, she's trying to buy a house, and really speaking to how the financial system is broken and what would it look like for us to upgrade that system. And I felt like, again, doing a really good job of humanizing something that for most people, crypto feels like we're in outer space. And I think they did. It was like really compelling and made me feel something.
Totally.
Which was powerful.
I think what a learning to take from that is, which so many crypto companies totally miss, is show not tell. And I think that they did that beautifully in that ad. And I think that like is a lesson, honestly, for me as a marketer. I'm like always asking myself, am I showing and not trying to explain something, which is...
Also, they had a great hook. Like, the ad opens, and it's a baby talking, and you're like, what the fuck? Like,
Totally.
immediately you're
Stop
like,
the
okay,
scroll.
stop the scroll. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
so they did a good job with that.
Okay, worst campaign.
she said
I'm not
Sure.
going to name
No?
names, but what I will say is I still admire people who take risks. And I think the trick is if it doesn't work, call it quickly, call it well, and move on. And if you can handle that well, I think it's fine. And you actually may gain some respect in handling that. But I don't know. I just think like take some risks, right?
That goes back to building in public, is being willing to put something out and like
Be
saying,
wrong.
and being willing to be wrong publicly about something, I think is a risk that is appropriate. Worst campaign.
There's a few that come to mind. I would say the most recent one that hit the boys club Slack like a bomb was the Solana, it wasn't Breakpoint, Accelerate conference ad, bad, really bad. And like top to bottom bad. I was like, I can't even believe this, but I think they were trying to be polarizing and they took it too far, but I do think they did a good job of, I mean, there's two arguments to be made. You could say, it's great to say, we're wrong, we're shutting it down, this is not going to be on the timeline anymore. The other is to be like, we're sticking to our guns. But in that case, there was no world
It was
where
good to call it.
I will say,
and
we're
I think they
talking about
handled
it
that
now,
well.
though.
Exactly. So, what's your worst?
I just think like any time there's bots and the timeline feels botted, I'm out. And I can't think of a specific campaign. There's a lot of bots out there that are contributing to various crypto campaigns. So I think that's like, that as soon as I see that, I'm like, I'm no longer interested.
Yeah, I'd say kind of sort of a follow-on to that is like being careful with this. Something that does come up a lot in these calls with founders is KOL strategy. And I'm finding very small companies are spending egregious amounts of money on KOLs. And I don't think they're really getting much out of it, to be honest. So I hope that is a trend that we see die off. Although if there's KOLs here, they're probably like, no, this is great for me. But yeah, because I think you also know that. I don't know if it works.
I think a well-timed
maybe.
endorsement from someone who's built credibility, I think it can be really powerful.
I think I also think KOL has become a catch-all for a lot of different things.
Yeah.
So I see that mistake made.
Yeah, I think if you could do maybe a smart, let's call it influencer strategy, where you can build it in with people who are believers and bring them into your fold, absolutely. Hiring a bunch of people who are just kind of paid to put something out that feels not authentic, I think people see through it.
Yeah, I think it absolutely has to be in that person's voice. The person who comes to mind for me is Packy McCormick, which I'm sure no one thinks of as, I don't know, maybe people do, but like he, to me, is someone who I know that when he is brought in on something, he spends a lot of time learning it, and then spends a lot of time writing the thing that he's going to share about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the style of relationship that you need with your KOLs versus like a spray and pray type of situation with like quality over quantity, I guess.
I totally agree, and I think Packy is absolutely a great example of that, yeah.
Love Packy. So, go ahead.
He was just at the ramp thing. I don't know if people saw the ramp talking about good campaigns. Did you see the ramp stuff on the timeline?
Yes, yeah.
It was really good.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, it was really fun. Live streaming with the guy from The Office, and then jump scare, Packy McCormick was there, and I was like, "What's going on?
I missed that part.
What is happening here?"
He
was like, I think interviewing. He was like in the booth. There was like an activation with Ramp, the credit card, where they had Kevin from The Office, who's sort of like their spokesperson right now, which is funny and smart. And he's like in like a glass cage of emotion. Like he's in like an office. I think it was near Bryant Park or something. And he's going through like expense reports and getting over flooded. And it was like a live stream of it. And they had different like influencers and people come in. Like the Rizzler came in. And Packy McCormick. And I was like, what did the Rizzler and Packy McCormick have in common? Ramp, credit card, apparently. Anyway, so that was a funny
that was
situation.
a fun campaign.
Yeah,
That got a lot of attention.
Man, I feel like we're going to start seeing everyone in those glass boxes everywhere.
Because it was a Severance did it. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And they did it at Grand Central, right?
Yes, yeah.
And now we're doing it. We're running it back. But if it worked, we're talking about it. Okay, let's talk about personal brand building and what you recommend to your founders on that front.
I recommend they invest in it. It doesn't have to be like the entire team, by the way. You can sort of designate somebody who feels more comfortable with that. And I think it has to be, like I said, it can't just be like you hawking your product in your company constantly, right? Like it has to be authentic. Ish, our social media guy, who's great at this, he always recommends that, like, for example, he sits down on like Sundays and is like, okay, what am I going to put out this week? It's just spend some time writing and getting some ideas together so that you don't have that kind of cold start problem when it comes to the week and you're like, oh shoot, I got to do some stuff, right? But you have to be consistent. You can also be reacting to what's going on out there in the community and have just weighing in and having opinions on it. It's also a great opportunity for you to talk, the sort of trend jacking comment that I made earlier, like what is the conversation and how can you naturally insert yourself in there? If you don't have anything to say, then don't say it. I'm not saying that you should just make shit up all the time, but if you can find ways to just kind of be part of the conversation, I don't know, 2-3 times a week, start that way and kind of build from there, you're gonna start having people reach out to you, you're gonna build relationships. I can't tell you how many founders I know, they come to events like this and they're like, oh, I know you from Twitter. It's so great to meet you in real life. Like, I think it can be a really powerful community building tool. And again, gives you an edge when you have your own announcement, or I will say, when you have a crisis-like moment that you might need to correct the record on something. Yeah. If you have people listening and you've developed a voice, there's no other better way to correct the record than doing it on your own turf, on your own terms.
Yeah. Deana, what do you think about personal brand building for yourself?
I see the benefits of it, but I don't feel like I do it nearly enough. Yeah. And that's a result of like, I don't know, like so much of it is like trying to figure out what you have license and credibility to speak to. And I think I just personally have some
baggage.
What is it when you just don't feel qualified?
Imposter syndrome.
Imposter syndrome. Yeah. So I think that is like just personally what I battle with.
Which I think typically women have more of than.
Yeah, but I think that's my stopper when it comes to personal brand building. I'm like, I don't know why do people don't care about me saying anything?
Yeah, no, I feel the same. But
Yeah.
one thing I've taken is like, okay, so I do these calls with founders all the time, and we're giving it sort of similar advice. I'm like, okay, I've said the same thing 3 times this week. I'm gonna put that in a tweet,
Yeah.
right? As a founder or builder, it's like, what are the conversations you're having with your team? What are you guys remarking about on what's going on in the industry? What do you think is cool? What is a trend that you don't maybe like and you want to call out? Like, it's all good fodder. Right?
Yeah.
I also think on that front, it's really helpful with a couple things. One is recruiting, and I
Yes.
think that is like
Super.
both for the recruiter and the recruitee to find jobs and to be noticed for jobs. But I also think that it's useful. I'm trying to think of who does it well. When you see personal brands built across the team. So it's not just the founder. It's like, no, it's the BD girl, it's the events person. It's like across the spectrum. I always find that's a really great way to get a fuller sense of an org, and it drives a lot of credibility for me personally when I'm seeing like a lot of different voices speaking from a single org. Optimism did it well.
Yeah, I agree, and I think, look, like the way the algorithm works, you need people to be sort of supporting you and hyping it up for you to get that attention. So it is helpful for you to put something out, have people across the team support it in different ways, just to help boost it and get a better signal. I mean, that's just the reality of how the algorithm works now. And the other thing I'll say is, like, sometimes people feel like, well, I don't want to, you can't tweet too much right now, is what I'll say. Like, the way the algorithm works, like, you kind of have to flood the zone. Like, people aren't going to see your stuff enough where they're going to get annoyed with you, right? So I always tell people, like, you can't do it enough. Or you
I get
can't do
annoyed
it
with
too
people
much.
on Twitter all the time.
Deana loves to mute and block.
I'm a muter.
I never do. I'm a purist. I'm like, if I'm following, I have to see it. But I also think 2 things come up for me around this stuff. Is one, in the age of AI and where we're headed, like, I do think that's a moat that is going to be really important. And the more that you can be working on that now, I think in 5 years, you're going to be like, I'm really glad that, because there's been so many moments in the last 4 years where I'm like, I wish I had made some errors and my face is all over the internet and I regret this. And now I'm like, I don't know, maybe maybe in 5 years I'm going to be really happy that, like, I've spent time putting a lot of stupid shit on the internet and some smart stuff. And then the other thing that I see a lot, just coming back to the whole team investing, is, it's like you have a real sense of the culture of the place as you see these people, what they're talking about, and a consistency across many different voices and many different faces. And especially if you have a team that's like really diverse and really interesting, then like that can come through on the timeline is very powerful for a brand, I think.
I agree.
Okay, we've talked a lot about social media, and we all know why, because crypto lives on Twitter. But I'm curious, as a marketer, how you think about the rest of the stack, right? Like, is it email, websites? Like, how, like, what's your advice to founders around, like, building a muscle around the rest of that stack? Or is it really just like, we have the highest leverage on X, focus your efforts there, and then, like, when you have the resources to build out elsewhere, you can?
Yeah, I mean, I think investing some resources in social, number one, it's really cheap, right? It's very easy. It's a free tool to build an audience. It's a good place to start, because then as you do other things, it will amplify everything you do, right? You can create all the content that you want, but if you don't have a channel for it, it's not going to go very far. I think that emails, like email newsletters, and I think that's very underrated, like underappreciated. I think it can be a really, really powerful tool. We do an email newsletter. You should subscribe if you don't already. But we do a lot of content. We put a lot of content out. But that email newsletter is a really powerful distribution tool for us. It's a way for you to talk directly to people. Coinbase has a newsletter that they started when I was there, and God, you just have all these users just sitting there. Like, you can feed them all kinds of great stuff. So email, I think, can be really, really powerful. I know it can feel old school to our world, but it can be great. Let's see, what other parts? There's media relations, sort of, traditional media, which I think is tough in crypto. There's crypto media, and you can get some traction there. I think it's really hard to get traction in trad media. There are a few good journalists, but there are also a lot of media outlets who just don't really have anything positive to say about crypto, and I don't really think it's worth your effort because you're going to put a lot of energy into it and probably not get a great story. But I do think it's good to have a balance of doing some traditional media and also social media, right? Because it's just another channel for you to get your story out. So why cut that off? I think it's good to consider that too. And there's a lot of great people who can help you with that. Like, you don't have to do that on your own. Again, you can hire like a consultant who can help navigate that for you around big moments and stuff. Paid advertising, I don't know. I think it depends on what your product is. Like, if you are a consumer product, which there's very few of in crypto, it can make a lot of sense. There's also the whole incentives game and things that you have to do to kind of get people in, which only works if your product is also growing organically. You can't fake that. But I don't think paid advertising works for most, right? Like, you have to get to the scale of like a World or a Coinbase or something like that to make it work. You can do some fun campaigns, but then it's like a flash in a pan, and what do you do after that, right? Like, how do you get people to keep coming around and thinking about you? A lot of people ask us about content because we do a lot of it, and podcasts, there's so many of them. I think it's really hard to start a podcast these days. I think you have to have a really good, interesting angle. Maybe you have a well-known person on your team, maybe you have a person on your team that has a big following, or you have like a very kind of specific niche that you're going into. Otherwise, I'd say it's probably not worth the energy to try to build a podcast audience. In terms of content, I think I really do encourage people to put stuff out there, whether that's technical content about your product to help builders, help recruit. I think that's never a bad thing. It's always great to have those deeper explanations of what you guys are doing. So I don't know, hopefully that's a few things in the stack. Anything else?
I would just say we get pitches all the time for being on the pod or being featured in the newsletter, and we read every single one of them. And if it's thoughtful and it comes from the founder and it's clear that they've spent at least 5 minutes like looking at the stuff that we do and talking about why it makes sense, like more often than not, we will have them on.
Totally.
And so I think like similar to the thing that you were saying about like do things that don't scale, hand-to-hand combat with your users, I think the same can be true for media and all sorts of media, like a thoughtful DM or like a really nice email pitching your thing is probably going to get you a better return than, I don't know, a lot of PR companies who are sending out a bunch of pitches all the time.
Yeah.
So, and I think also it, again, coming back to the personal brand thing, like it really helps if you click their Twitter and they even have like a 2,000 followers versus like 36 followers, you're like, oh, okay, they've been doing something. And so I think all of that is like a really helpful cycle.
Yeah, self-reinforcing. Yeah, totally. I had a founder recently come to me and say, like, I want to work on this story. I want to pitch this reporter. Do you think this is a great idea? And I'm like, well, I think number one, you should not just do one story. You're putting all your eggs in one basket. You should think about this again as like more of a campaign. This is a really big moment. You're totally evolving the company. You need to think about a lot of different things as part of this. But in terms of this one journalist, like, should you be the person that reaches out to them? Hell yeah. Like, journalists love hearing directly from founders. I do think it would be helpful for you to have a PR person who can maybe help you manage the story and help you think about other media that you should be talking to. So again, you're not putting all your eggs in one basket. But I agree, like, building those direct relationships, like, people love that. Podcast hosts, media, et cetera.
Yeah, I would say just make sure it's authentic. Like, the pitch that you're sending is authentic. Recently, we got a pitch that was an effusive DM about how much they love Boys Club and listen to Boys Club all the time, and then I clicked through to that person's profile, and they had just tweeted about their favorite podcasts in this industry, and we were not listed. And so I was like, all right, man, no, I'm not gonna put you on the podcast. So I think just to being authentic about your pitch for that founder, I think would be my main advice. Any closing thoughts, Kim?
Just in general, I think it's great people are considering marketing more and thinking about it. There's a lot of great experts out there who can help you as you start this journey. And it's definitely worth thinking about earlier than later, I would say.
Great. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Good to be here.
All right.